Hello and welcome to another Q's Views video. Now we're continuing with the next episode in the Monster Book series. And now we move into 4th edition. And we have the Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual. Now this is the very first Monster Manual. There were several editions of the Monster Manual done for 4th edition. But we're going to start right here with this one. Alright, so here we're going to start with the contents. You see the credits. We have a lot of different artists that were involved with this. Rather than naming them all, I'll let you go through their names individually. Now, true to form, we have some really nice artwork throughout this entire book, and I will be doing everything I can to showcase this artwork in a proper way, so it gets the credit it deserves. Now, in this particular book, it covers things such as size, origin type, experience points, initiative, senses, attack powers, target defense, ability scores, and of course, many of us who are into Dungeons & Dragons who came to 4th edition understand some of the ins and outs, some of the pros and the cons of 4th edition as a whole. For me, though, one of the things that I still found equally compelling with the other, as with the other previous editions of Dungeons & Dragons, is the creatures. Now, I know a lot of things change with stats and stat blocks and figures and that kind of thing. A lot of formulas changed, and so people were not so happy about that. But for me, the representation of the monsters and the monsters themselves was still intact and still a very cool part of the game as far as I'm concerned. Now, as in previous videos, I'm not going to cover every single monster on every page, but we'll do a page turn through, and we'll take a look, and I will discuss certain monsters that I have used or would like to have used but never did. One of the things I found interesting is that in most of the other books where the Tarrasque is featured, it's featured more towards the back of the book because it is entered as its name, Tarrasque. So T being towards the end of the alphabet, it's listed more towards the end. However, in this book, it is placed towards the beginning of the book. I mean, we're only on page 13, and here we are with the Tarrasque in all of its glory, and a very wonderful piece of artwork, I might say, as well. Now, in terms of the creatures and their presentation in this book, what creatures did you find most compelling to use? Which creatures do you feel... Now, obviously, the type of creatures you use and the way you use them will greatly differ from campaign to campaign, or even within chapters or episodes of the same campaign. Now, if you're like me, and when you run campaigns, sometimes campaigns can last a while. So sometimes you break those into episodic situations. Then, depending on how your adventurers are approaching the campaign, or how they're choosing, or the choices they're making within, can greatly affect not only the creatures you're using, but how you're using them. I think that's something that's very important for DMs, especially those, experienced DMs, to understand and to utilize in an appropriate manner. Here we got some pretty cool battle briars. We got some bears. Pretty nasty looking bear there. Some beetles. Got some dinosaurs. Beetles and dinosaurs. You can never go wrong with beetles and dinosaurs. Of course, you can't go wrong with beholders either. What would a D&D be like without beholders? Alright, we'll go ahead and continue. Now, in terms of 4th edition, I know a lot of people were not happy with 4th edition. A lot of people quit playing Dungeons & Dragons because of 4th edition and moved on to Pathfinder, which is something we will be getting into eventually in this series as well. Now, were you one of the people that enjoyed 4th edition and stuck with 4th edition? Or are you one of those who it didn't appeal to you? What was it about the mechanic? I know a lot of people had a lot of the same complaints, but what were your complaints with it if you in fact did not like 4th edition? What creatures or what mechanics made it difficult for you to get into 4th edition? And were you one of those that switched over to Pathfinder? And if so, what was it about Pathfinder that you enjoyed more? Now, whether you switched or stayed with 4th edition, how do you feel about the way the creatures were represented for 4th edition, such as the Death Knight here? How do you feel about the artwork? Do you feel that maybe because of the mechanic changes from 3.5 to 4th edition kind of soured the experience for Dungeons & Dragons for some players? That maybe took away from some of the luster of the way the monsters were presented artistically in 4th edition? Or do you feel that has no bearing? Such as with the demons here. For me, the demons look pretty cool no matter what. Alright, we'll go ahead and continue on with these monsters. We're getting through devils, and really crazy looking devils, such as the bearded devils here, which I definitely enjoy using in campaigns that require devils, chains, ice, even imps. You know, against an unprepared party, even imps, you know, when approached in fair numbers, can pose quite a threat, quite a challenge for a party. And as we know, it only takes one pit fiend to ruin an entire party. Alright. Really cool stuff here. Some more great artwork regarding the Devourers. So for those of you who didn't care too much for 4th edition, who did leave to play Pathfinder or maybe even something else entirely, did you end up coming back to Dungeons & Dragons for 5th edition? And if so, why? What was it about 5th edition, if you did come back, what did compel you to come back? Of course, we're getting into dragons now, and Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinders, any fantasy role-playing game of any kind would not be the same without dragons. I think that's just a given. Dungeons & Dragons, I mean, it's in the name. So, yeah. There's many other fantasy-style RPGs like this out there on the market. Castles and Crusades, you know, for example. The Dark Eye. All kinds of different games out there. Were you compelled maybe to go to one of those type of games instead of Pathfinder? Some really cool creatures. There's such great artwork with the drakes, with the Drider here. Here we have the Driders, which I did cover in the original Fiend Folio for AD&D, the 1st edition. Drow are always interesting in my opinion. How do you feel about the Drow? Have you ran any campaigns in the Underdark? Have you run any campaigns with the Drow? And if so, how did you utilize them? What were some of your experiences with the Drow? What were some of your experiences with running campaigns in the Underdark? And did you do so with 4th edition and use any of these particular entries within your campaign? Alright, now we're getting into elementals. And many of us know elementals are always fun. I like using elementals. Elves and Ettercap and Ettins, classic creatures. The Flame Skull, and a very interesting piece of artwork. Here we have the Fomorraine. Have you used the Fomorraine in a campaign before? And if so, how are they utilized? And what did the party do against it? What did the party do against them if you use more than one? Were they effective? Did they come together as a team? Or was the outcome less than desirable? What was it about it that brought the party down if they did fall to the Fomorraine? Of course, here we have ghosts, ghouls of all kinds. I'm chopping off his head. So let's bring it down just a little bit. There we go. All right. All kinds of fun, crazy creatures such as giants. That's another creature for me that just simply wouldn't be D&D without it, or giants. You know, and all your various giants, and not just giants, but also your giant kin. Interesting. The gibbering beasts here we have different variations. Githyanki, and which we have talked about before from previous books. The Githzerai, which have been an integral part of Dungeons and Dragons for many, many years, as is the Gnoll, as it is with the Gnoll, I should say. This one great creature after the next, just great stuff. Goblins. Alright, so now we'll move into the second topic, and that is, what is your least favorite creature in this book? If you own this particular book and you use the creatures they're in, such as the Grimlock or the Guardians, whatever you used, what was your least favorite creature to use and why? Did it have something to do with their stats? Did it have something to do with their abilities? Harpies. Did it have something to do with maybe the changes that were made to them between the previous editions that made them maybe less fun to use? Did you have a particular go-to monster? Maybe there was a monster you'd like to use fairly often. Or maybe there was a monster you didn't care to use or didn't like very much, but you used it anyways, just because it worked well as like a good fill-in monster, or a good creature to use when you needed something really quickly that maybe was just fodder. You know, just fodder for the party. Maybe to give them a sense of accomplishment, maybe to bridge an unforeseen gap within the campaign or the adventure setting. Maybe something took place with the party where they made a choice you wasn't expecting, and you needed a creature just to kind of throw in there, just real quick, just to kind of, provide, the little extra bit of substance that you didn't count on needing. And although you didn't care for the creature, it worked out great for something like that, maybe. Let me know all that in the comments section down below. Maybe we can have a nice discussion about that. Lycanthropes, magma beasts, manticores are always cool. Now, if you're one of the people that did stick it out with 4th edition, and you did play quite a bit, was it your favorite of the D&D editions? Was it your least favorite? If it was your least favorite, which version or edition of Dungeons & Dragons was your favorite up at this point? Now, same goes for the opposite direction. If this was your favorite version of Dungeons & Dragons, if you really enjoyed 4th edition, maybe even was a minority with your friends and other campaign players, which edition of Dungeons & Dragons before 4th edition do you feel was the weakest? If this was not, which one was? And which creatures do you feel best represented 4th edition from this particular book? Maybe which ones were the most fun to use? Here we have the gelatinous cube, a pretty good artwork piece, along with the ochre jelly. It's pretty good. I've always liked that piece of art when it comes to jelly monsters and that kind of thing. And of course, here we have Orcus. There's some great creatures. In my opinion, some great representations of some classic creatures from previous editions and from previous monster books, such as the purple worm. It really doesn't get more classic than that. The Quickling, which has been portrayed various different ways throughout the years and throughout the various editions. Same with the Rakshasa. You who do feel like 4th edition up until this point was the best edition of Dungeons & Dragons, which I don't suspect there'll be many of you, but if you are, how do you feel 4th edition stacks up to 5th edition? if you've in fact played 5th edition? Do you still have yet to try out 5th edition? And if so, is there something particular preventing you from trying out 5th edition? Or you're just simply having so much fun with maybe 4th edition or in other games, such as Pathfinders or whatever, that you simply don't find that it's maybe worth it to try to switch over to 5th edition? I know some people are very happy playing Castles and Crusades. Some people are very happy playing Pathfinder. Some people are very happy, playing a whole plethora of other RPGs that are out there that are based on this style of fantasy. So much so that it's like, well, maybe it's not worth it to switch, There's an old saying, if there's nothing broke, don't fix it. So maybe that's your sentiment when it comes to 4th edition. Now, for those of you who have moved on to 5th edition, what is it about 5th edition that you really like over 4th edition? Do you feel like 5th edition maybe should have been the 4th edition? Some of the changes that were made? Or do you feel like that's the edition you deserved in 4th edition instead of 4th edition? Let me know that in the comment section down below as well. I'm very interested to see what you all think regarding that. I've heard a lot of, table talk regarding which edition is the best, and and I've heard everything from I like 2nd edition to I prefer 3rd edition. I've heard people say although they liked 3rd edition, it got old really fast. And then of course you still have people even now saying that 5th edition's been dragged out too long. We need something new. We need something different. There are still problems with 5th edition. Where's 6th edition? So let's have that conversation. Let's make it interesting. Here's some great artwork regarding the wights. Very great and fun creatures. Such a great job on the artwork. How do you feel about the artwork in this book overall? Do you feel it's better than some of the other previous monster manual books for Dungeons & Dragons? Or do you feel maybe there's some previous editions that did a better job? For me, it's really hard to compare because a lot of the art in some of the previous books were done very differently. You had, of course, your 1st edition books were just black and white ink and pencil drawings. Then, of course, you get in the 2nd edition where they were using color, and the artwork was very good. Although some of it maybe is not as detailed as some of the artwork we have now is. Maybe you prefer a more detailed art. Here we get into stuff like racial traits, bugbears and drows and gnolls. Some very cool tables of stuff that we can look through. Here we have the glossary. But here we are at the back of the book, Monstrous Foes for Every Hero. Within the pages of this core rulebook for the 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game lurk nearly 500 fearsome and deadly monsters for your heroes to face, each one specially designed for ease of use and excitement in play. The Monster Manual features longtime favorites such as giants, demons, and dragons, as well as the brand new titans, angels, and elemental archons. The book includes threats for characters of every level, from the lowly kobold minion to the mighty Orcus, demon prince of undead. So there you have it, the Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual for 4th edition. Thank you so very much for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you again for those who are participating in our discussions in the comment section down below. And I look forward to seeing you in the next videos. Until then, stay safe, stay well, and take care of each other.